He was the all-American boy. Tall, handsome, articulate, intelligent. The kind of man every young boy wanted to become. And every look dreamed of being with. Ted Bundy looked like the prototype of success. He studied psychology, worked in politics, even volunteered on a crisis hotline, talking people out of suicide. But behind that polished facade hid one of the most terrifying minds in American criminal history. Because what could be more dangerous than a killer? A killer who understands exactly what he's doing, does it with chilling intelligence, and completely understands his pre's. Ted Bundy didn't kill out of madness. He killed out of control, calculation, and cruelty. He manipulated, hunted, and destroyed, while smiling. Over a span of just a few years, Bundy confessed to murder over 30 women, but police believe the real number could be over 100. And almost all of his victims had one thing in common. They were young, beautiful, and kind-hearted. The kind of girls who would stop to help a man with a broken arm. The kind who never saw it coming. His reign of terror didn't just claim lives. It shook the very foundation of how America viewed trust, safety, and evil itself. This is the story of Ted Bundy, and it begins not with blood, but with a smile. The creation of a monster. Ted Bundy, born Theodore Robert Bundy on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont, had a childhood shrouded in deception. His mother, Louise Cowell, was only 22 when she gave birth to him out of wedlock. To protect her reputation and avoid social shame, she told the world that her parents were actually his parents, and that she was his older sister. Ted grew up with this false narrative, never knowing the truth about his own identity. The truth about his parentage came to light when he was older, but the revelation only deepened his sense of betrayal. His mother, whom he believed to be his sister, had been the one to deceive him all along. Ted's early behavior reflected a growing sense of anger and alienation. He was a quiet, introverted boy, often bullied at school for being socially awkward. Despite his intelligence, he couldn't quite fit in with the other children. There were signs of violence early on. Ted had a disturbing fascination with cruelty, often torturing small animals like birds and rodents. This behavior is often seen as a red flag for the development of psychopathy. His interest in violence wasn't limited to animals. Ted Bundy had a fascination with pornography and sexual violence from a young age. He reportedly began consuming pornographic material during his teenage years, gravitating toward the more violent and deviant forms of media. It's believed that these early exposures to such material, combined anger and confusion from his fractured family life, contributed to his growing obsession with power, control, and sexual dominance. Ted's mother, Eleanor, eventually remarried, but Ted never accepted her husband as a father figure. His feelings of rejection grew deeper, especially when he discovered that discustody had been kept from him for years. The lies about his parentage, the sense of betrayal from his mother, and the violent tendencies he developed became the psychological fuel that would drive him to commit heinous crimes in the years to come. Ted graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School in 1965. His good academic achievements were overshadowed by a growing reputation for dishonesty and trouble. He frequently found himself in trouble with the law for petty theft and minor criminal behavior. Ted was also known to be an unreliable worker. After graduating from high school, he enrolled at the University of Puget Sound for a brief period before transferring to the University of Washington in Seattle, where he would continue his studies in psychology. At that time, Ted began to shape a new image for himself. He was no longer the awkward, introverted teenager. He had a new sense of confidence, and his charm, good looks, and intellect made him popular among his peers. Ted became known for his politeness, his ability to engage others, and his charismatic personality. However, despite his outward success, Ted's personal life was far from fulfilling. He met Stephanie Brooks. He immediately captivated by her beauty, sophistication, and social status, seeing her as the ideal woman. They bonded over their shared love for skiing, and Ted was determined to win her affection. However, despite their time together, Stephanie eventually ended the relationship, citing her lack of long-term commitment. Ted, unable to accept the rejection, became deeply hurt and obsessed. Ted's interest in violent pornography during this period, alongside his feelings of betrayal, exacerbated his obsession with power over women. He began seeing women as objects to be controlled and discarded, reflecting his psychological need to dominate in response to his earlier years of rejection. This need to prove his worth and take revenge eventually evolved into real violence, with his first known abductions and murders. The Hunt of the Pretender. Ted Bundy's first confirmed murder occurred in 1974, shortly after the breakup with Stephanie Brooks, when his emotions were consumed with rage, frustration, and a need for control. He had begun targeting women who resembled her, young, attractive, and vulnerable. In January 1974, Bundy abducted Karen Sparks, 18-year-old college student at the University of Washington. He attacked her in her apartment, beating her severely and sexually assaulting before leaving her for dead. Miraculously, Karen survived, though she suffered brain damage and was unable to provide clear details about her attacker. This brutal assault marked the beginning of Bundy's violent spree. Following Karen's attack, Bundy's pattern of violence escalated, with the second victims being Janice Ott and Denise Naslund in July 1974. Both women were abducted from Lake Sammamish State Park in Washington, where Bundy lured them by pretending to be injured, asking for help to carry his boat or load his things. Once they were alone, he would overpower them, drag them to his car, and take them to a secluded location where he would kill them. After Ted Bundy's first confirmed murders in 1974, his attacks escalated in frequency, brutality, and precision. He refined his methods, becoming more confident in his ability to manipulate and deceive his victims. The common approach at that time of Ted usually was showy, a charming demeanor and handsome looks. He often wore casual but neat clothing, such as button-up shirts, slacks, and a jacket, which made him appear harmless and well-dressed, not like the stereotypical image of a killer. He drove a beetle-shaped Volkswagen Bug, which, at the time, was considered a cute car, which is the favorite car of that time woman. That also made him seem non-threatening. Bundy usually pretended to be injured or handicapped, gaining the sympathy of his victims to lure them into his trap. He would often fake a limp, using crutches or a sling, or make it appear he had an injury that required assistance. He often asked for help, such as carrying a heavy object or opening his car door. Once the victim agreed to help, he would knock them out and lead them to a secluded location where he could overpower them, often abducting them to a different area where the murder would take place. In 1974, Ted Bundy targeted Kathleen, a young woman who would become one of his few survivors. As was his common tactic, Bundy approached Kathleen under the guise of needing assistance. He pretended to be injured, claiming that he had difficulty carrying something or getting into his car. Kathleen, likely seeing a man in distress, agreed to help him. However, as Bundy tried to lure her further away from the public eye, Kathleen, to sense something was wrong, keep a safe distance. The key moment came when Kathleen did not turn her back on Bundy as he told her to help him collect something and tried to move her into a vulnerable position. It wasn't intentional at first. She simply stayed facing him, likely out of an instinct to remain aware of his movements. Later, Kathleen would reflect and realize that this simple act of not turning her back on him had saved her life. Continued his rampage, attacking women across multiple states. His methods grew more calculated and daring, and he often used fake injuries to gain the trust of his victims. His next confirmed murders were committed in Utah, where he abducted and killed Nancy Wilcox, 16 years old, and Melissa Smith, 17 years old. In both cases, Bundy used his signature tactics. He lured the victims to isolated areas before overpowering them. By 1975, Bundy had moved to Colorado, Bundy killed several young women there, including Karen Campbell, 23 years old, and Julie Cunningham, 26 years old. The bodies of his victims were often found in secluded areas, showing signs of violent sexual assault. The Chi Omega sorority house murders. In 1978, Bundy's killings reached its peak with one of his most brutal and high-profile attacks. The Chi Omega sorority murders at Florida State University in Tallahassee. On the night of January 14, 1978, Bundy entered the sorority house and attacked 4 women, killing 2, Lisa Levy, Margaret Bowman. Bundy used his usual tactics. He sneaked into the house late at night, and then attacked the women in their sleep, bludgeoning them with a blunt object. After killing them, he sexually assaulted their bodies. However, he didn't stop there. He also attacked 2 other women, Karen Chandler and Kathy Klenner, both of whom were seriously injured but managed to survive. The brutality of this attack was unlike anything Bundy had done before. He had escalated from abducting women from remote locations to attacking multiple victims in a single night. The Chi Omega murders were followed by another brutal attack in February 1978, the kidnapping and murder of Kimberly Leach, a 12-year-old girl from Lake City, Florida. She was abducted while walking to school, and her body was found weeks later in a wooded area. Outwitting the law. Ted Bundy's ability to evade capture for so long can largely be attributed to his intelligence, charm, and knowledge of the legal and psychological systems. As a distinguished psychology student at the University of Washington, Bundy understood human behavior, which he used to manipulate both his victims and law enforcement. His education in law further aided him, giving him insights into police procedures, investigation tactics, and how to exploit legal lose his advantage. Bundy was also involved in the criminal justice system through his work at the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Commission and as a research assistant at a missing persons center. He even wrote a rape prevention guide aimed at women. Despite mounting evidence pointing toward him, Bundy's background and connections made easy for him to avoid suspicion. The police announced that the murderer drove a Volkswagen Beetle, pretended to be injured, and called himself Ted. Witnesses reported his description, and even a co-worker and girlfriend raised suspicions, but their concerns were dismissed by police. Escaped the justice. Bundy was arrested on February 15, 1978, after a routine traffic stop in Pensacola, Florida. Officers had noticed his car, a Volkswagen Beetle, matching the description of a vehicle linked to the Chi Omega murders. After stopping Bundy for a traffic violation, police found evidence in his car that directly tied him to the crimes, including a ski mask, gloves, and tools often used in his attacks. Bundy was arrested and charged with multiple murders. At the time murders, Bundy was already suspected of several murders across multiple states. His capture was a pivotal moment in the investigation, and police finally began to connect the dots between his various crimes. Bundy was soon linked to the Chi Omega murders, which had been the culmination of his brutal killing spree. However, the murder streak in 1977. While awaiting trial, he managed to escape from the Utah prison where he was being held. Bundy took advantage of the inadequate security in his cell, removing a section of the ceiling and slipping through the gap. He dropped into the attic space, and from there, made his way out of the prison. Bundy was free for 6 days before he was recaptured. In June 1977, Bundy managed to escape from the Picken County Jail in Aspen, Colorado. This time, Bundy had sized down by losing weight and used his physical changes to fit through a small hole he had carved through the ceiling. He spent 2 months on the run, continuing his violent rampage. His first killing spree after his escape occurred in Florida, where he committed 2 murders in July 1978. He murdered Cheryl Thomas, 21 years old, and Kimberly Leach, 12 years old. After 2 months, Bundy's time on the run came to an end on February 15, 1978, when he was again arrested after being spotted by a patrol officer. He was driving suspiciously around the streets of Pensacola, Florida, and was pulled over. Ted Bundy's reign of terror ended with his arrest, but the scars left behind on his victims, their families, and the communities he terrorized are indelible. I just want to ask you one thing. If you were trying to stop me from killing, and you had a gun, would you pull the trigger? This quote reveals Bundy's complete lack of remorse. He viewed murder as a simple act, something that others might stop if they could, but he himself never saw any moral hesitation. For Bundy, killing was just an act of power and control, nothing more. Bundy, like many killers, justified his actions in a warped way. He even once claimed, "I had no remorse for what I did. I would kill again." This statement reflects his deeply distorted mindset. Bundy didn't kill out of necessity or even personal desire for vengeance. Instead, his killings were motivated by a thirst for domination, and he felt no guilt in pursuing that need. Bundy was also a master of manipulation. In interviews before his execution, but in reality's words highlight his total disconnection from humanity. He had embraced his own evil, using his intelligence and charm to deceive everyone around him. Ted Bundy's crimes serve as a disturbing reminder of how charisma and normalcy can mask unspeakable darkness. His life shows us how a person can distort reality, justify their actions, and manipulate everyone around them, even law enforcement. The lesson here is not just to be cautious of the monsters among us, but to remain vigilant against the subtle manipulations and justifications that allow evil to thrive. The real question we must ask: how do we recognize and stop the next Bundy before they become the next predator?